day 5 of our investigation, and as time keeps slipping into the future, it's starting to feel like more and more of a real possibility that we might not be finding Emma alive at this point. I mean, if we think about some of the possible scenarios that Emma might be in right now, she could easily still be out in the woods, lost, disoriented, coming down off some hallucinogenic high. And if that's the case, she's been out there without food or water for up to 4 or 5 days at this point. There's also still the very real possibility that a person or persons have taken her hostage, kidnapped her. But to what end, we have no idea. I mean, there's been no ransom notice made, no demands made to her father, the mayor. And it's even more worrying because our one real connection we have between her and everything going on, all the shadowy stuff we've been finding out going on in the town, Isabella, well, she's also gone missing as well. But even if there is the possibility that Emma is no longer alive, I think it's still up to us to figure out the truth and keep on plowing forward with our investigation. Which brings us to our first, point of interest right now, which is the sheriff's station. You might recall, after we found all the drugs last night in the junkyard, that Sheriff Morgan did have plans to bring in old Dennis for a bit of questioning. And it does seem that Matthew's suspicions have paid off, and indeed, Sheriff Morgan is in the middle of questioning Dennis. Problem is, as we already know, Dennis is pretty much a huge curmudgeon, and he's not going to be in too great of a mood to be brought in so early to the sheriff's station to be accused of, being a drug kingpin. I mean, it also doesn't help that Dennis is always in a bit of a surly mood, probably what with all the protests going on outside of his house, and also his son being a massive delinquent, but Mary Lou thinks it's something dietary. Part of me, though, thinks it's the fact that, with Sheriff Morgan being in a position of power, and also Dennis being in a, capitalist position of power, they're just two alpha males butting heads, trying to prove, which person is superior over the other. Yeah, it seems Sheriff Morgan does have, something against the amount of land in Mizzurna Falls that old Dennis does happen to own. You would kind of assume, though, at this point that, even if you do own quite a number of parcels of land, even if you are a real estate mogul, you would have a fairly good idea about the upkeep of each one of those parcels of land. Case of the junkyard, though, Dennis seems to say that he hasn't been on that land in a number of years. He has no idea what's been going on in regards to land, which I can kind of understand. It's probably not much of a use for the old junkyard in such a small town. But once Morgan did mention the drugs that they found there, the color did drain out of Dennis's face, which could either mean that he did know about the drugs, or he was mostly just worried about possibly facing some legal repercussions about having drugs found on his land. And while Matthew is more than happy to throw out the Constitution with, reasonable cause to, do search and seizure on somebody's property, Morgan still thinks they need a little bit more evidence before they can work on any further angles regarding Dennis. If anything, he feels that what's most important right now is trying to find the missing Isabella, because she seems to be the real linchpin in everything going on right now. Especially if she can direct us towards, that missing, nefarious, criminal mastermind bonehead. Sheriff Morgan also does make a quick mention here that they do have a strategy room where they collect all of the up-to-date information they've gathered on the case so far, and there's a little bit of a hitch here. There's no longer any green marker for the whiteboard, and Sheriff Morgan has absolutely no time for this nonsense. He has to get back to the investigation. And yeah, I can imagine he's probably in a pretty sour mood after having to deal with Dennis and all of his nonsense. Yeah, at this point, we've never really been in the strategy room, and we get this almost David Lynchian extended shot here showing us exactly where that is in the police station. And that's where we want to head right now to try to gather up our thoughts about some of the locations we've been to at the game so far. Now, I think up to probably maybe a day or two ago, we would have been freely able to go in here at any point we want to. I think once we gain the trust and understanding, I guess, of Sheriff Morgan and our importance in the investigation process, I think he would have been more than happy to let us in here. But I think this is really the first instance where we pretty much need to go in here to continue on in the story. But yeah, on the whiteboard here we find a number of important locations. We have the bar, the school, but there's only 3 specific locations we want to focus on right now. The first being the ruins. Yeah, the interesting thing about the ruins is that I guess most people in town didn't even think that people lived there. It seems like it's such an old and dilapidated building that I guess most people just thought it was abandoned, but yeah, we already know that Captain Nas lives there, and that Isabella may or may not live there, but at least she comes and goes there fairly often. And we also know, I guess from having had that conversation with Captain Nas before, that, that Dennis does happen to own the apartments. In addition to that, all the way up in Coughlin's Peak, also know that there are these worker lodgings. And from what we gathered previously, the workers' lodgings, kind of like the apartment complex, is in a bit of a dilapidated state to the point where it doesn't really seem like the workers are even living up there at this point. And while the workers did voice their want to have a bit of refurbishment done up there, Dennis was not really into the idea, though initially we thought it could just be because he's a cheapskate, but now it seems like it might be for some ulterior reasons. Might be that he's just trying to have an open piece of property where he might be able to hide more drugs. Or it might have just been a convenient place for Mel to have a hideout after that robbery. At this point, though, we can't be 100% for certain. All we know is that this is definitely another piece of property that Dennis owns. And the one final piece of property that I think we are fairly certain that a crime has happened at and that Dennis also owns is the Junkyard here. Also, I like the little touch here that the text goes from green to yellow because, as Mary Lou stated, her green marker did run out. Yeah, last night we did find out that there was a whole mess of drugs in a broken down bus on the Junkyard property, and that the Junkyard is owned by Dennis. But it's still very much within the realm of possibility that Dennis just didn't know what was going on at the Junkyard. It might just be a disused piece of property. But considering his presence at both the dilapidated apartment building and the, dilapidated workers' lodgings, he seems to still be pretty on top of all the pieces of property that he owns. And it's from investigating those specific 3 pieces of property that we do get this little scene here with Mary Lou. And really, I appreciate all the information she did collect here. It definitely helps us to collect our thoughts over the course of the game. There is the notebook where we collect our own thoughts, but it's always good to have, an outside perspective with all that. But with all this information, it does strike a chord with Matthew here, because he realizes that, yes, the lodgings, the ruins, the junkyard, they all have they have a couple things in common. 1, they all had a crime that happened there, and 2, they all belong to Dennis. The thing is, are there any other places in town that Dennis might happen to own? And Mary Lou, being the font of information that she is, has some pretty useful information for us. Namely the fact that Mr. Aston does happen to own a little cabin on the opposite shore of the lake. And if you recall, there was an interesting picture that we found in the ransacked apartment of Isabella. Namely, it was a black and white picture of a little cabin in a wooded area that Matthew seemed to think was not out in Barrows Forest, but, well, now seems could definitely be this other piece of property that Dennis owns. Still, Matthew wants to play his cards close to his chest. He doesn't want Sheriff Morgan bumbling his way out there and ruining our sweet investigation. But considering that this is a little cabin on the opposite side of the lake shore, we are going to have to maybe secure some way to make our way across the lake. As you can imagine, with it being the middle of winter, we definitely don't want to swim across a icy cold lake. Still, I have a very good idea where we might be able to secure a means across that water. That's at that small boathouse right on the lakeside's edge. Now, outside of these small bits of food that they might sell here at the boathouse, they should hopefully have a boat for us to rent. Inconveniently, though, we see boats out there by the pier. It just seems that the owner here is not really up for letting us rent any of them. He does make the excuse that, it seems like a prime opportunity to do some upkeep on the boats, what with there not being many people wanting to go out and row upon the icy lake. But still, it's very important that we get to that opposite shore, so it'd be nice if he could just cut us a little slack and let us rent one of the boats, but unexpectedly he does make mention, or he kind of lets slip, that somebody else has also requested going to that opposite shore as well recently. That makes me super suspicious as well, that this guy is hiding something from us. But he just wants us to accept the fact that he is just not going to let us rent one of his boats. Personally, that's fine with me, because, if I look outside these glass doors here, all I see is a big wide open pier. And if it was me and I needed a boat, I would just go straight out there and take one of these boats. Before we get to that, though, our thievery has been interrupted by an unexpected phone call. And who might it be on the other end? It's none other than Isabella. She seems to be in a bit of distress. And to make matters worse, she can't even tell us where she is right now. All she mentions, unexpectedly, is something about a ring. And at this point, considering our somewhat limited inventory, there is at least one ring in there. And also, coincidentally, that ring happens to have a big uppercase I on it, which makes me think, well, that is definitely Isabella's ring. Especially considering at this point we know of the connection between, Emma and Isabella. It's not outside the realm of possibility that, Emma was entrusted with Isabella's ring. But just what can we really do with the ring? Well, maybe if we show it to the boathouse owner here, he might be more than willing to let us rent a boat then. Yeah, by flashing this ring, it seems that, well, we are showing ourselves as a part of a larger organization. I mean, he mentions a group. Maybe Isabella came here and talked about these boats or shut off access to these boats with a larger group of people, but considering her distress and the possibility that we might need to go after her on the other side of the lake, it seems a bit strange, I guess, that she would kind of strong-arm the boathouse owner here into not letting people use any of the boats. If anything, though, this does get us, hopefully, access to one of those boats out there. It's also a bit interesting. I know I think I managed to forget to do it earlier on, just because there wasn't much of a reason to at the time. But if we did show Isabella's ring to Wolf at the bar, he makes mention that it is a similar ring that a local gang uses. I assume that is the gang that possibly Bonehead and maybe even Mel were a part of. And I guess that could be the larger, quote-unquote, them in this situation. In the end, though, even if the boathouse owner does try to dissuade us, we don't honestly have any time. We need to get to Isabella as soon as possible, because she seemed in a pretty bad state. And the boathouse owner finally acquiesces, and we now have a means to get across the lake. Still, we want to wait a little bit of time here, I think till around, 8:05 a.m., because there is a small event that we want to make sure and not miss out on here. Just have to wait for Winona and her dad to come barreling through to do their normal, random gazing out at the lake. I'm not actually fully sure what Winona's dad does out here outside to just stare longingly out into the cold, icy abyss, but, well, we'll leave him to that. Because the main reason we want to wait a little bit is because we do get a quick phone call from Winona. And while she could have easily talked to us while she was, pinballing our car around, I guess she wanted to have a better spot to have a small conversation. And it does work out for us, coincidentally, very amazingly well that we just happen to strong-arm the boathouseman here to lend us a boat, so we were right where we needed to be. Seems to be in a bit of a melancholy state, as she usually seems to be, what with her friends still very much missing. And initially it seems like she's just trying to, I guess, wax philosophical about, the last time they saw their friend alive. But it is actually pretty important that we make sure and trigger this event here. Because outside of lingering on memories of the past and all their fun barbecues here by the lakeside, it also seems like Winona has continued her own little side investigation. In fact, she has convinced the homeroom teacher to let her back into the school. And the primary reason for doing that was, I guess she felt there was more to be gained from checking out Kathy's locker. Yep, I kind of assumed that once we checked Kathy's locker, we had found everything we could in there. I mean, it's a locker. It's pretty easy to search very thoroughly, even though the police never did it. Or wait, we'd actually checked Emma's locker, not Kathy's, so I guess that does make sense. I guess that was poor investigating on our part. But she did find something of interest in Kathy's locker. A small mysterious note which supports the idea that on that Christmas Eve she did in fact go out into the woods with Emma. Also scribbled along the bottom there, it looks kind of like a partial phone number. Perhaps that was some burner phone number that Emma and Kathy had set up for their own little private conversations, but I guess more than anything this does at least support the fact that, both of them did meet up in the woods that fateful night and did something out there, possibly, fueled by hallucinogenic drugs. Still with another clue now in our possession. We do kind of want to, end this on a somewhat positive note, just not all dreary memories and helpful clues for our investigation. Even though my own suspicions about whether or not Emma is alive at this point are kind of dwindling into the realm of the negative, I feel like it's probably best we try to keep Winona in the best spirits and just say, yeah, she's probably alive. Also, I am pretty curious about this phone number here. Also, a bit curious about why this was written on a flyer from Bar Wolves. Still, on the telephone number there, we can make out at least 3 of the possible 4 characters. And thankfully, since we're only limited down to 4, face buttons to enter in for the phone number, it's a pretty easy job of figuring out that final digit. Question is, what does this number go to? And I was not expecting that. Yeah, it is the phone number for Dr. Samuel's office at the hospital. Why would that number be on this flyer that Kathy had for both her and Emma? I mean, there has been a little bit of suspicion, I guess, on my part regarding, what Samuel has, to do with everything. I mean, he is a bit of a weird character, but yeah, he definitely was not on the higher end of my suspicion list. In the end, though, I guess this is just another lead that we need to follow up on. I mean, this definitely gives the impression that Dr. Samuel, whether or not he has actually revealed it, I guess did run into maybe Emma or Kathy at Bar Wolf on that Christmas Eve. Just another layer to this ever-expanding mystery. I guess just another real suspect to follow up on in regards to, I guess, Kathy's demise and her state and just where Emma might be. But for now, though, it's time to get onto that lake. And yep, there's a bit of cumbersome rowing to be done. It does have slightly different controls than the car, but it's not too difficult to get down and maneuver with. And considering there's no other, boats on the lake, it's not like we're going to run into anybody out here. And yeah, the only reason I sped this up is because traveling by boat is a little slow, and even with all our dawdling, we need to get over here as quick as we can. No one on the outside of the cabin. No dangers out here. It's mostly just a fairly unassuming and normal-looking cabin, at least from the outside. Still, before we go barging in, I do want to get a look inside. There's a convenient window up there, just a little bit out of our reach. Good thing for us, though, is that there is this little... I don't know if this is a stump or just a barrel, but it will be a pretty convenient footstool for us. And what do we find inside? But pay dirt. That's right. We find Isabella and... Could this be the leader that Bonehead has spoken about in hushed whispers before? Could this be, the person running the whole drug trade in town and, the mastermind behind everything going on? Well, it definitely seems like he knows about Mel and about all the epoch that's possibly in the junkyard. And it definitely seems like he knows about the larger scheme going on that I guess Isabella might be connected to in regards to all the drugs. And that's especially worrying that I guess she was luring in Emma and Kathy to the whole buying of Epoch thing. Was she just playing the girls for a fool and trying to get them hooked on drugs? I mean, at this point, we've been trying to think the best of Isabella. She's been in a pretty bad situation here in town. She's obviously given the impression that she's under, somebody's yoke. She's just somebody else's puppet. Kind of get the feeling that it was this guy, but this guy is making it more seem like it's Isabella who's doing all the plotting and, luring in of teenagers to get hooked on drugs. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that this guy is keeping her held hostage for all the knowledge he has about the drug trade in town and about, probably her knowledge about all the missing girls and the dead girl. More perplexing, though, is that any suspicions that we had about this guy being the ringleader are kind of thrown out because we find out that he is just going under somebody else's order. So there's someone even above this new shadowy, illegal, criminal mastermind here. Even more, along with Isabella, this guy is also holding someone else hostage. A girl that Isabella knows very well. And my first suspicions, my first positive outlook on things, this has to be Emma. We don't know anybody else in town that Isabella could be very familiar with. And, I mean, fingers crossed, because it seems like that means that Emma could very well still be alive and being taken care of, albeit by this nefarious man here. And I mean, it's still something of a silver lining with all the dreariness going on right now in the game, all the bleak outlook that we had before. Also, good news for Isabella, we do happen to have a boat off the island. We do happen to be on her side to get her out of this place. Still, I do kind of worry about the fact that we're dealing in such a very small area that I think Isabella has the better idea that we should probably just make a run for it, maybe go call the cops. But Matthew is pretty steadfast and sure of himself. I mean, he has done pretty good in the investigation so far. A lot better than the police, I'd say. Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense that she wouldn't think that we would come. I mean, it seemed like she had explicitly called us to come and get her. I mean, maybe she didn't think we would be stupid enough. I mean, there's still the possibility that she is just playing us like a fiddle and putting us into a purposely dangerous situation. And she could be the ringleader in everything right now. I don't know if the game would go that deep into throwing red herrings in our way and misleading us like that. If anything, she does seem pretty adamant about trying to stay here and maybe just Matthew going off and getting the authorities to try to handle things, but yeah, she kind of feels that if she stays here and she just remains an active, alive hostage with these guys, that maybe in turn they'll also keep Emma alive if indeed Emma is that other person that they're currently holding captive. Still, I don't really hold out the expectation that they aren't going to kill her. I feel like they are just trying to make sure that any other loose ends that might be running around are taken care of before they take care of her. I don't really see why they would probably want to keep her alive. Still, with a slight bit of poking, she does decide to come with us. Which immediately runs into problems, as you could assume. Like I mentioned, it's a very small area of land here. It seems very likely that we would have run into her captor. Yep, this criminal is a bit of a perfectionist, which makes me think even more that he is not going to let Isabella get out of this situation alive, even if she was totally complacent with his demands. Good thing is that old Matthew here is not going to go down without a bit of a fight. And this guy has been a little bit bored just staying here doing a bit of babysitting, so he's more than happy to oblige us in a bit of the old fisticuffs. And believe it or not, Sandman is probably the most difficult fight so far, mostly for his copying of Matthew's special ability. The main thing is that his use of the special ability is really, really damaging. As you can tell, that one little headbutt there did almost the same amount of damage as, I think, a full, connecting combo from Matthew. And he will spam it like crazy. And it's just so frustrating. But I did manage to figure out that you can actually do the final big hit of the Matthew combo pretty consistently by doing a small little short kick and then another punch after. It seems to go a lot faster than just trying to do a full punch combo. And yes, I have to have a lot of practice with these fight sequences because they do not go very well for me for the most part. But yeah, it worked out. We managed to knock out Sandman here. We gave him his own little dream. Which means we can now safely get off the island, or at least we could, if not for the fact that Isabella feels this is the best possible situation to have another small conversation. And Matthew rightly so thinks, we can have this conversation away from the dangerous criminal, but Isabella just cannot wait to tell us this super useful piece of information. That's right, Emma is alive. That is so amazing to hear, even though we already heard it in the cabin, or at least we could piece it together in there. But yeah, that's amazing news to hear. Though it seems we can't just ever get just straight up good news. Isabella, we honestly could have had this conversation on the other shore. I have no idea, outside of plot reasons, why she really, really felt the need to talk about this here. But as she slowly slips out of consciousness, she does feel quite a bit of remorse, because even more so now, she feels horrible about getting Emma involved in all this. Which definitely seems to go along with the whole idea that she was not really innocent in all this, that she was actively luring in people to get hooked on these drugs, to be a supplier, I guess, and those rundown apartments for the teens of the town to get hooked on this very dangerous hallucinogen. And at this point, while Dennis could argue the fact that he might not know about somebody at the junkyard that he owns harboring all those drugs, there really can't be any question that he would know about, or he would not know about his vacation home, his remote cabin being used for housing a hostage. So, with that, it seems like Sheriff Morgan is finally willing and able to put out an arrest warrant for Dennis, so hopefully we can bring him in. And in case you were wondering or hoping that the Mizzurna Falls Police Department or Sheriff Department got any better at their job, nope. Much like Bonehead, Sandman has made his way out of that small area at the cabin, and he has eluded police somehow. Honestly, not sure how he managed to do that, but yeah, that I don't feel that will be the last time we'll be running into Sandman. In fact, I think we're going to have to sleep with one eye open, gripping our pillow tight. Oh yeah, there's also some other bad news. Dennis is dead. Yeah, the possibility that Dennis could easily be the drug kingpin, head of the criminal organization in town. If that is a possibility, that has kind of gone into the wind at this point. What with him killing himself? Oh yeah, spoiler alert. They found him having shot himself. I mean, I guess it's good there wasn't really any suspicion that maybe, the person giving the orders to Sandman, could have put out a hit. I mean, there's so much to process right now, but at least, Isabella is possibly alive. And that gives us something to go on, but for right now, hopefully you'll join me next time as we will continue on in day 5, hopefully figuring out more of what's going on.